Hello again, and welcome back to Story Time with Nana Lynn and Glow. We have 2 more chapters to finish up, and I think I've already discovered the riddle, have you? I think I've discovered the answer. I think I know what it is. But anyway, let's get on with it and see if we can find an answer. Chapter 33. Can I get you something to drink? Anita asked, addressing the class and sisters who were gathered together in her living room Sunday evening. Excuse me. I'm fine, Elizabeth said. Martha and Mary also turned down her offer. Elizabeth was certain it was because they felt the same way she did, too excited to think about anything else. I'm not sure why you're here, Anita said, her forehead slowly furrowed. We just talked on the phone a little while ago, I told you. And I told you, Elizabeth, that I understood why you had to quit trying to solve my father's riddle. Well, that's just it, Elizabeth said. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her jangled nerves. We found it, Anita. Anita's eyes widened and her mouth dropped open. What? What did you say? I said we found it. We found your treasure. Anita's eyes widened and her mouth dropped open. What? What did you say? What? You found it? Immediately her eyes filled with tears. Are you sure? Please don't tell me this if you're not sure. I'm absolutely certain. Elizabeth leaned forward in her chair. We looked for hidden value in everything you gave us. In the end, it was the thing that seemed to have the least value that turned out to be incredibly significant. I don't understand. Elizabeth cleared her throat. Well, first of all, let's look at your father's riddle. She opened her purse and pulled out the folded sheet of paper. They studied it time and time again. No matter how hard we tried to make this fit all kinds of different things, it just didn't. In the end, we were willing to assume that your father was a little confused when he wrote it. So we tried to make it fit loosely to something. That became the sword. It was the only thing that made little sense. But after a while, we discovered the sword couldn't be the answer. And that's when we gave up. But then something happened. Our daddy's truck, Mary said with a wide smile. Truck? Anita looked confused. What are you talking about? Elizabeth shot Mary a look, but she couldn't be upset with her for jumping ahead. They were all too wound up. Elizabeth's heart was beating so hard, it was amazing it didn't leap out of her chest. She stared down at the sheet of paper and began to read. When lightning speaks and feathers fly, and your mother's sister's child makes dirty pies, you'll find yourself feeling quite continental. Open your eyes and you'll see the truth, hidden in shadows and very sentimental. She looked up at Anita. I'm going to explain each and every line, and you tell me when you understand what the riddle means. Anita frowned at her. Well, all right, if I can. Actually, we were close to solving it a couple of times. Mary and Martha both had it right, but like you, we decided the riddle couldn't have an answer to do with vehicles. You weren't selling any cars or trucks, but that's exactly what your father was trying to get you to see. She nervously cleared her throat. We solved the first 2 lines correctly. Well, kind of correctly. When lightning speaks and feathers fly, it's a thunderbird. But not some kind of mythical bird, it's the car, a thunderbird made by Ford, Mary said. Mary, hush, Martha hissed. Let Elizabeth explain this in her own way. Mary leaned back in her chair and sighed deeply. She's taking too long, she mumbled. Elizabeth couldn't help but laugh at her fidgety sister. Yes, that's right, Ford. And of course your mother's sister's child is your cousin, Anita said. Right. And what is a dirty pie made of? We made them when we were kids. Anita blinked a few times as if she was thinking, oh, mud pies? Exactly. Then we get to, you will find yourself feeling quite continental. Anita shrugged. I'm not sure. Again, think in terms of a car. A Lincoln Continental? Yes. Then your father talks about something hidden in the shadows and something very sentimental, and he was right. The answer has to do with something that means a lot to us, to all of us. Anita threw her hands up in the air. I still don't get it. Well, let's look at the words, okay? What are they? Anita rubbed her forehead for a moment. Ford, cousin, mud, Lincoln, and something sentimental. Elizabeth didn't say anything for a moment. She just waited. A strange look passed across Anita's face, and she leaned forward in her chair. Ford. Ford's Theater, the theater where Lincoln was assassinated. The play that night was Our American Cousin. She frowned for a moment. Mudd. Samuel Mudd, the doctor who conspired with John Wilkes Booth. And of course, Lincoln's shooting was sentimental. He was a very beloved president. She clasped her hands together. But how do shadows have anything to do with this? Elizabeth bent down and removed a large envelope from her purse. She carefully extracted a photo from it. When you gave us that gaudy picture frame to sell, we never really looked at the picture in it. A quick glance at a couple we didn't know. The woman who bought the frame tossed the picture on the floor. Thankfully, we found it before it was damaged. She carefully handed the photo to Anita, who shrugged when she looked at it. This couple is related to us somehow, but I have no idea who they are. That's why I didn't keep the picture, although I probably should have kept the frame. I bought it for my father when I was 5. It was the very first gift I ever gave him. Of course, it was cheap and gaudy. He only used it because he didn't want to hurt my feelings. Look at the photo again, Elizabeth said, in front of the theater and then in the shadows. As Anita refocused on the photo, she gasped, "Oh my goodness. That's President Lincoln and his wife in front of the theater. They must have just gotten out of their carriage." And in the shadows, Anita stared closer at the photo. Then she suddenly looked up at Elizabeth, amazement on her face. "It's him, isn't it? Standing in the portico. Isn't that John Wilkes Booth?" Elizabeth shrugged. "I'm not sure, Anita, but if it is, you might have the only photo of Booth and Lincoln together shortly before the shooting, and I can't even imagine how valuable it is. It's probably priceless." Tears slipped down Anita's face as she gazed at the photo. And someone actually threw this on the floor? "It almost went in the trash," Mary said. "Elizabeth was smart enough to hang on to it just in case you decided you might want it back." "Oh, Elizabeth, thank you," Anita said, her voice breaking. "I wish my father would have just told me about this photo. His love of riddles almost cost me this priceless photo." "It almost cost America this picture," Martha said. "I'm sure it'll end up in a museum for all of us to see. I'll contact the appraiser that I've been working with. He can help me get it to auction." She smiled. "But I'll make sure it ends up somewhere where everyone can experience it." Through her tears, she slid the photo back into the envelope. "I can't believe my father put something this priceless into that ugly old frame." "Don't you remember, Anita?" Elizabeth said. "That frame was important to him because you gave it to him. With all his valuable antiques, that old frame was his greatest treasure. That's why he put your treasure inside of it." Anita lowered her head and sobbed. "That means more to me than anything he could possibly have left for me," she choked out, and then she looked up at Elizabeth. "I think I'll keep the frame. Suddenly it seems incredibly beautiful." "It really is. I have to ask how you finally figured it out. You told me you'd given up." Elizabeth laughed. "Actually, our father solved it, or rather his love of Ford cars and trucks." She told Anita about showing John the truck. As we began to tell him how dedicated Daddy was to Ford, I thought back to all the different kinds of Ford vehicles we'd had. I remembered that the one car he always wanted he never got, a Ford Thunderbird. Suddenly the riddle began to come together. The word Continental became a car too, the Lincoln Continental. The rest of it was easy once I had the word Lincoln. "But at that point, you didn't realize you have anything related to Lincoln." "That's right, but your father said something about opening our eyes and seeing the truth." Suddenly I remembered the picture. I'd noticed a theater behind the couple in the photo, but I hadn't looked at it closely. Could it be Ford's Theater? I have to say I wasn't sure I was right, but I went to find the picture just in case. She laughed nervously. To be honest, for a while I couldn't remember where I put it, but I finally found it in a drawer in the desk in my room. Once I looked at the couple, I could see the truth, as your father said. "I'm not sure that picture would have occurred to me," Martha said. I mean, even if I'd noticed the theater, actually, something Mary said when we first saw the picture clicked in my memory. Do you recall what you said, Mary? She shook her head slowly. Honestly, I barely remember looking at it. You said it wasn't a great shot. When I looked at it, I saw what you meant. The woman in the photo had her eyes closed. I'd noticed it was the first time I saw the picture, but it didn't sink in until I realized that it fit the riddle. Mary snapped her fingers. Oh, yeah, I remember now. I assumed it was one of the reasons that Anita didn't care about the picture. I really didn't know how to thank you, Anita said, and I want to give you part of the money from the sale of the photo. A finder's fee. You deserve it. Well, we appreciate that, but there's one other thing that you could do with it that would mean a great deal to us. Well, anything. What is it? Well, you can do what you said, about making up with Uriah, and after you do, we'd like both of you to come over to the house for dinner. Well, I'll go over there tomorrow. Hopefully he'll see me. If you want to start out with what you learned from the diary, I'm sure he'll be happy to talk to you. And tell him that the sword is his, that you have no interest in getting it back. I'll do that happily. The sisters said goodbye and left. Although they were quiet on the way home, Elizabeth knew they were all satisfied with the outcome of their adventure. Maybe now things would settle down. She was certainly ready for this life to become a little less exciting. All right, well, we have one more chapter just to wrap things up, and we will see you in the next video.